Finally coming off of hiatus, welcome back to my list videos. And before we get started, I'd just like to thank you all for the support and getting me to the amount of subscribers I have now. Just a little more to make it to that 1,000. But as for today's video, I will be ranking the Cam Study rap ciphers. And if you haven't yet, or this is the first time you've heard of him, I recommend checking out his channel for his rap ciphers, video game rap battles, and some of his own original music. A link is in the description below. Now for this ranking, I will go over the rules real quick. First off, this is based off of my opinion. If your ranking differs from mine, please let me know in the comments. As for the criteria that I used, I looked at each cipher's individual flow. This includes how well I felt that the music and beat worked with the cipher overall, as well as each individual verse, as well as how I felt each bar and verse worked within the cipher. And lastly, if any cipher had its own uniqueness to it that I may have appreciated. And with that, we begin the ranking of the Cam Study rap ciphers. Every list has gotta start somewhere, and for this one, we start at the Pokemon Champions rap cipher. Now don't get me wrong, I actually did enjoy this cipher. I liked the words and the beat to it, and it was very unique with the verses that used two people in them. However, while it started off good, it was about the third or fourth verse where the flow makes a drastic change. After that, each verse sounded like they belong with a different cipher. It's not that it sounded bad because I enjoyed the music and the lyrics. It's just that I felt like a little over half of it started sounding like separate ciphers. And while there's nothing wrong with each verse having their own unique sound, I just wish it flowed a little bit better into one another to connect them as one cipher. So the Sonic Protagonist cipher had a decent sound to it. The beat and the flow kept very well constant throughout the whole thing, and so they were able to work it very well together with each character. There were a couple of verses that I didn't feel fit the character as well, and like I said, it was at least a decent cipher. Some characters did have unique verses that still fit the flow that I actually did enjoy, and while I do appreciate them sticking to the personality with most of the characters, there's really not much else I can say with this one. The Pokemon Fossil rap cipher was an interesting one, but I feel it suffers the same as the Pokemon Champions to where it had a good start to it. But where the Pokemon Champions started sounding a little too different, this one kinda started sounding a little too similar with each other. I know it might start to sound a little nitpicky, but it did start to seem like some of the verses were meshing together, and you wouldn't even know they were on a different character without them telling you. I will admit, some of the verses still had their own unique sound that did help them to stand out among the rest of them. It was about time that the rest of the legendary Pokemon got their cipher. I definitely did enjoy the beat and the flow to this one, but this is definitely a cipher where I found some of the verses that I really liked, and some that I felt were just okay. I also liked how some of the verses, like the one for the Alola legendaries, had such a haunting sound while still keeping with the flow. It's definitely a good cipher, and one that was long overdue, but I definitely enjoyed the first legendary Pokemon a bit more. It was a little hard to place this one here since I did like this one, especially from the beginning where it really gets you amped up to listen. The beat and the flow were very much on point with this one, working everyone's unique style into one cohesive piece. In fact, it kind of seems like they took a lot of the sounds from the Pokemon Champions rap cipher and changed it up a little bit to make it sound like it all still fit within one cipher. Meanwhile, the verses still getting to have their own unique individuality. The only thing is there are ciphers that I did like more than this one. I'm going to be honest, I actually thought this one was going to be a bit lower, but upon re-listening to it, I realized how good it actually was. The Egyptian tone resonates very well with the cipher, as well as ties in the lore of the series itself. And I really have to give them credit for what they had to work with, considering half of the characters don't actually even duel but sit off to the side, and some who only ever win off-screen. Other than that, the verses were pretty good, some better than others in my opinion, but still enjoyable. I don't know if it's a good thing to say that the villains did better than the protagonists, but here we are. Honestly, I don't have much to say with this one. I enjoyed the flow and the beat, plus the lyrics were really on point with this one. They did well to capture the intimidation and darkness of each character. Other than that, not much else. The Pokemon Professors is another one that makes it to the middle of the road to where it was a good cipher, just not much to say about it. Professor Oak starting it out, reminding us of him being the OG professor, was done really well. And of course the flow and the beat was really good, nothing more, nothing less. Although I suppose Professor Ivy and the Orange Islands are still going to continue to be cut out of things. So now we're going to make it into the ciphers that I actually started having a harder time with placing. But I really did love the beat and the flow of the pseudo-legendary Pokemon rap cipher. And this is one of the ones that really had an intense flow to it that really worked with the characters that they were using. Plus, some of the verses had bars that had very clever wordplay and references used. Although while understanding references, some of them had wording that made it just a bit odd, and the verse a bit weaker than some of the others in my opinion. Now, when I said that I had difficulty placing some of the rest of the ciphers, I meant it. But I do feel comfortable with placing the Evolution rap cipher here. I actually enjoyed the way that they started this one, and the beat really gets you into it. The clever wordplay and references to other animes and franchises were also fun little Easter eggs. It's honestly hard to find anything negative to really even say about this one. I just liked other ones more. And that's probably going to be the negative for a lot of the ciphers from this point. The Pokemon villains had almost made it into the top 10, honestly. This is another one that had a lot of intensity behind it, which I actually loved for this one. The flow was really well done and kept the intimidation factor of each character. Unlike most other Pokemon rap ciphers, this one didn't use a lot of clever Pokemon wordplay, but I don't think it really needed it, because they did well in capturing the ambitions of each character. Now there were some questionable bars, can still understand the reference, but were still a bit questionable. Other than that, I feel that this cipher deserves its high spot on this list. Although I am still curious on what Jesse and James's verse would have been, and if Meowth would have came in at the end saying that's right. Starting off the top 10, we have the Pokemon Rivals. And I already love the flow to this one, with the music matching each character based on what game they come from. And again, it's another cipher that captures a lot of their personalities perfectly. A couple of verses though I felt had some strange things to flex on. Probably my favorite thing though was Gary having the rock instrumental in his verse. High energy, great flow, great lyrics, the Pokemon Starters cipher had all of that. No matter which generation you prefer, every verse delivers something special. Although it seemed like some verses favored one Pokemon over the others within its starter set, that's overshadowed by the smooth flow and memorable beat. And it was nice for them to include Pikachu and Eevee in at the end. And from just the starters to the Pokemon types. And this is another one with a very memorable beat and flow to it. I also appreciated how they used the type symbols from the Pokemon card game. I also felt that each artist's style fit their respective Pokemon type very well. The Aloha to the Alloy was a nice variation of a classic catchphrase, and although the verses were shortened, it had to be considering how many types there are. And now we make it to the first legendary Pokemon rap cipher. And this is the one that had some people questioning why there were particular legendaries that weren't used. But as many as there are, and only using one set per region, it makes sense that it was split into two parts. That being said, this is definitely my favorite of the two, with the flow and the lyrics never missing a beat. And the intensity of it speaks to the level of power that these Pokemon possess. But now that the legendaries have had two, it's time for the mythicals to get theirs. Now if you're wanting high energy from start to finish, this is definitely that Cypher. I know some people complained about the faster tone to this one, but I think it fit very well. Some of the artists were even able to work that into their verses. I do feel like some of the clever wordplay, like the Cinnabar line, hasn't gotten the recognition that they deserve. I absolutely loved this one, but the only question remaining is when the other gym leaders of the other regions will get their Cypher. So I haven't played League of Legends or watched Arcane yet. That being said, I definitely feel this one has earned its spot in the top 5 for me. The beat, the flow, everything was as epic as what you'd expect. I do assume that they were going off of the personalities of their respective characters, and if so, that definitely adds to the Cypher. In fact, they're so good at conveying the emotions just through the lyrics alone that even someone who hasn't watched the show yet can feel it. And honestly, this was a contender for the top 3, but there are still others that I feel really earned that spot for me. And now we make it just outside the top 3, and it really was a very tough choice of figuring out which one would take that 3rd spot. The Sonic villains had pretty much everything that was good in the other villain ciphers, all rolled into one. The intensity and intimidation of the villains, plus the flow and lyrics that portrayed their ambitions. Even villains from the less popular titles had some solid verses. And honestly, I can't even really pick a favorite verse from this one, and it just seems like each one kept leveling up from the other. And with the end giving a very pleasant surprise with the inclusion of Sonic EXE. Like I said, it really was a toss-up between this and the Sonic villains, but the Pokemon trainers slightly managed to make it in. From start to finish, it did not seem like there was even one lyric out of place on this one. Even if they seemed a little odd, it still worked. Whereas villain ciphers portrayed intimidation within their lyrics, this showed the confidence of a hero with their lyrics and flow. If the Sonic villain cipher was everything right with a villain cipher, this is everything right with a protagonist cipher. And just like the rival cipher, I absolutely love the rock instrumental used in the end for Ash. While it is that I had stated that a lot of the top ciphers were harder for me to place, these last two pretty much had their spot already, as these are the ones that I favored the most. The Mythology cipher was done for the game Dislight, and it shows just how much this project meant to Cam. The lyrics not only portrayed the characters in the game, but the actual stories from the 4 main mythologies themselves, even going so far as to sneak in references to modern-day franchises inspired by these mythologies. And they did a great job incorporating music to go along with each mythology, while still smoothly flowing into one another. A lot of attention to detail went into this one, and even the use of the phrase "drop the beat" from the game was well incorporated between each verse. You can say this was predictable, or that it's just a nostalgia trip, but I stand by this choice. And besides, the nostalgia was done purposely and done well for this cipher. Because honestly, this really was the perfect send-off for one of anime's most iconic duos. I also feel it shows just how far Cam as well as the other artists have come since the early days of the video game rap battles, which is poetic in a way considering the cipher is about Ash's full journey through all the regions. Every line perfectly displays Ash's personality as well as what he went through in each region, as he didn't give up on his dreams. And the flow and music also leaves you feeling like you're going on a triumphant journey. Really, everything just came together perfectly for this one, and I really cannot find a negative in it. And plus, you can't tell me that you don't at least shed one tear when listening to that ending. And that is my ranking for the Cam Steady Rap Cyphers. So let me know what you think and what your opinion is. And also, please be sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. And remember that until next time, keep gaming.